Okay. So let's see. This week has been a bit. Well, I guess I'll just start by saying, initially, when I was doing the surrender, it was a little bit too effortful, a little bit too. What's it called? Managey.
Yeah.
Even though it wasn't like I wasn't trying to manage it exactly. It was just like checking a lot. Is like, am I? What was it? Am I checking if I'm checking?
Checking if you're checking. That's hilarious.
Checking if I'm checking, or one. Yeah, checking if I'm surrendered or not, or not surrendered. I was saying surrendering, but if I'm managing it, or checking, managing, checking if the mind is active or not. So I'll get in a loop once or twice or a few times, and then it would stop until it would start again. So and then so maybe not the purest, but it wasn't like entirely intentional, I guess. And then let's see. I got a sense for. I progressively got better sense after, like, because I had to rewatch the recording to get like a better sense of like how to surrender more completely. And aside from the checking, there was I noticed there was like a difference between whether I would start with, or I would remind myself, what is it? What is it? Don't worry about the, don't. What was it? Don't worry about the state of the surrender or something like that. Don't worry about the state of the...
Don't worry about anything. Why worry?
Yeah, but sometimes I would just remind myself.
Mm-hmm.
It's like sometimes it would feel like I'm like doing something, or like I'm like observing, and then I would have to be like, kind of feels like I'm observing it, and then I have to be like, okay, remind myself, let go of the observation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's how it goes. You weren't aware that you were doing this on a subtle before. You're becoming more aware of it now. And so before you don't do that anymore, you go through a period where you start catching yourself in the middle of it, earlier and earlier and earlier as time goes on, until you catch yourself just at the edge, just as you're beginning, and your mind just starts to relax at that level. And at some point, it just stops happening. But yeah, it'll clear up when the observe split like finally like really collapse. Until then, good progress.
Okay. Let's see. I did notice there was a difference between whether I would prompt myself to not worry about the status of the surrender or whatever, or if it would be like, don't, let go of the mind or something like let go of mind or something like that. That would produce like they produce like different qualities of like feeling flavors, flavors of feeling. And I just noted that, and sometimes that might prompt me to be like, um, it's sort of hard to tell sometimes if I'm like if I'm really like watching myself or not. I mean, I guess if it feels like it, I guess I am, but it gets kind of trippy. Because like I'm like aware of feedback passively. I'm not actively looking for feedback, but passively I'm like aware of feedback coming in the form of like the sensations arising, and there's subtle sense of releasing at a subtle level and a little bit at a grosser level. But when that it feels like it's very subtle when that can like shift into actually like observing, actively observing the actions of the body or whatever, body mind. So it gets a little trippy. So I'm a little bit unsure sometimes, but usually usually something happens to be like there's like a period of just nothing, and then there's something, and then there's nothing. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Repeat that last part one more time. You just had to finish the message.
yeah. There's there's can be a little bit of playing or not playing around. I can't think of the word of the phrase. Not finagling. I'm not managing things, but just getting a sense of like not doing nothing.
Yeah.
And really, because sometimes it's like something, and then there's nothing, and then there's nothing again, and then there's something, and there's nothing again. And
Yeah. It's gonna pulsate that way because you're like alternating between these different modes. Yeah. That's why like my emphasis isn't on like doing a practice or doing a technique. It's literally just shifting orientation, recognizing that everything that seems to be doing is already doing itself. The moment that you notice anything, the awareness is enough. You don't even have to remember to relax. Things will relax themselves as you become aware of them. And so you get more skillful at allowing yourself to like kind of slide in to a pure experience of non-doing without fabricating uh, mental views that suggest that you're partaking or managing any part of the process. Um, it's really a felt process. The hints that your mind is giving you and the things that it's reminding you of have been helpful for a portion of the journey. You're going to start to get to the point where you outgrow them because even, like you said, checking for checking, reminding yourself to like let go. What is it that's holding on? Is there something holding on? It's like, it still comes with all these assumptions. So it's really at the felt level where you start to feel the pressure come up, and without having to say anything, it starts to relax on its own. Sensitivity is key. But yeah, at a certain point, it'll be as simple as All right. I'll use the flow analogy. Why not? I love the flow analogies. It's kind of like, instead of there being like a flow of a river, it's more of like an upwards flow of like the steam and like pressure of experience slowly fading by itself. And that comes in the body as a sense of relaxation, as the fluidity of energy, as things quieting down. But the quality of being on the continuum of letting go is that everything is naturally depressurizing itself. From that perspective, if you're ever not experiencing that, it's because your mind is covering over. The key is not to do anything with the mind. It's just to bring back your awareness to that deeper, subtler flow, allowing dimension where things are happening by itself, and continue to let the process take care of itself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it does.
Yeah, allowing yourself to just flip back and forth between certain things is like useful in the sense of notice that surrender is already happening. Don't look for it, just notice and allow it. And it starts off subtle at first, and it starts to build up and become more clear. It's like, oh, just being. Everything's happening by itself. And if you notice that the quality of surrender is also very alive within the body, that accelerates the rate at which your energy starts to relax and smooth out. Because you don't just want a spacious quality of surrender and opening, you want also the tangible sense of the body unwinding and letting go as well. And yeah, now try to assess whether the practice is going well or not. And notice how almost immediately it starts to block the flow of the surrender, of the allowing. Because now you're trying to assess anything. And now just notice again that surrender is happening by itself. Nothing to worry about, nothing to do. Just here. And then notice how you feel when we introduce the idea. Oh, you're surrendering. A little bit of pressure slows things down a bit. Even the concept of doing well versus not, even that has holding. And so just notice, oh, surrender is happening by itself again. And this time I want you to introduce a certain view, but I want you to notice primarily the feelings that are coming just as you're forming the view, before you even completely say it to yourself. Form the view of this is going well. And just as you start to notice that, just let it go. Just stop trying to form it. And do it again. See if you can catch yourself earlier. Form a view. And just as it starts to distort the smoothness of the field, just allow it to just happen by itself. And this time, Just form the intention. Don't even form the view. Form the intention to have a view. And the pressure here is a lot subtler than the view itself. And so, are you noticing that?
Yeah.
Yeah. These are each layers of sensitivity. The view having already been formed is much grosser. If you catch yourself while the view is already formed, then that's where your sensitivity is at that moment. If you cultivate the intention to start to become aware earlier, you'll start to catch it as the thought starts to form, as the view starts to form, and you can relax even earlier, you can surrender even earlier. If you get even subtler, you catch the impulse of intentionality that arises that precedes the forming of the view, and you allow yourself to relax there. And that's when shit gets really cool. Because now it's really like instinctual, it's intuitive, it's because intention arises prior to the mind to a certain extent, or to thoughts rather. It's an aspect of mind, but it's not like the superficial grosser level that we're used to dealing with. Now you're dealing with shit purely at the sensational level because it's not even getting to the point of becoming a thought. Now you're just noticing like the compulsive energy that leads to it. And the point is to just be aware of the compulsivity, of the arising tension, and allowing it to fall away. It's going to happen by itself. So that's kind of like the trajectory that you experience as it becomes clearer and clearer and clearer. Less and less doing, less and less managing, less and less actively trying to assess or make it work. More and more, okay, sometimes there's pressure, sometimes there are things arising. Even those things are not issues because they're already being surrendered by the time I've noticed them. Any comments or questions on that?
No.
Mm. Yeah. So, let's see. Have you ever had an experience where it's kind of like life just kind of stopped for a moment? Like everything went away and then everything came back? It's like almost like a blackout that you're semi-conscious of. You ever have that experience?
I don't think so.
All right. So I'll use the idea of sleep then as an analog. When you're asleep and not dreaming, everything is gone. There's no pressure, there's no space, there's no cognizing, there's no perception. It's just pure. When you wake up and these things start to arise, you feel so rested because you spend a really good amount of time in a deeper kind of non-doing than you're used to. If you can allow yourself to remember the quality, even though it's weird, we're not conscious while we're, sleeping outside of dreams, not in the way we're used to. So it may seem a bit nebulous, but nonetheless, we can still access it. recall the quality, the felt quality of just being totally asleep. And that quality has like an inverse pull to it, where instead of like a pull of gravity towards something denser, it's a pull towards a less dense way of being. And as you allow yourself to feel that completely empty quality of, it's not thinking, not sensation, not perception, it's just pure. There's nothing. It's everything has already been let go. It's like you start to notice that, like, oh yeah, this pressure releasing by itself effect is starting to happen by itself. And all you got to do is let yourself slip in deeper and deeper and deeper into that quality that you're tuning into. The body, the sensations, the mind is going to manage itself. It's like a slight orientation towards a subtler aspect and just letting it go, letting yourself be carried by that natural momentum and flow. And the thing is, since anything that has to do with perceiving or cognizing is too much for the purity, it'll become a lot more obvious the way that your experience subtly tenses up around these subtler dynamics. So we're using the experience of something much more open, much more free, to contrast and illuminate where the holding might be. Because presence itself is enough, we're just cultivating awareness. We're not actively trying to let go. We're not relaxing the body. All of these things are going to happen by itself by simply being aware. We're just working with the way we're aware, getting closer and closer to not being aware in any particular way, just awareness. The mind particularizes awareness. It's the different kinds of particularizations that we're becoming sensitive of and releasing. And yeah, in that sense, you can't go wrong. Like, who you are is who you are. The habits that you still have are the habits that you still have. And it's progress if you're becoming more deeply aware and noticing more and more how it's happening by itself. That takes the pressure off the mind or the ego identity to manage or figure this out, because this is not the level where it's working from. And so accessing space or purity of surrender, those are approximations towards these subtler, more purely surrendered states. For a while, the concept of like dreamless sleep was a really, really good pointer, because it's just so obvious that none of the things that we hold on to, even the things that are still here in some of the meditative states that we've experienced, even that is too much. It's not what it's about. Comments or questions?
So you're saying you recommend bringing up this quality of dreamless sleep, like that feeling, like as maybe at like the start of like formal practice or just throughout the day or something like that?
It's just a reference. It's just one of many references for surrender. Emptiness is the way that Buddhists point to it, but it's a bit abstract. I like to ground things in tangible things that people already have some clearer understanding and more experience of. So it's just to engage the quality. But to answer your question, how about you answer it for yourself? Allow the quality to arise. Allow yourself to slip into it, and just allow it to take place. And we'll talk about what you notice afterwards. And there's no real resistance or pressure that can get in the way. It's just another part of the flow. So whenever you notice even the slightest hint of things slowing down or pressure the mind, nothing to do about it. Not wrong, nothing to remind yourself of. Just notice the quality and continue allowing yourself to slip further and further into that quality we're referring. Everything's taking care of itself. And it's almost like you're letting your mind fall asleep while your consciousness is still awake or alert. Because it starts to like almost mute or nullify the power and the prominence of thoughts such that their density decreases. And you can more clearly see them just fading away almost as soon as they start to come up. Because intuitively it's like, not that, not that, not that, not that. It's nothing tangible. You're letting your experience open up and slip further and further into this quality of dreamless sleep. What do you notice?
There's like a sense of like a clearing out. Like there was compared to surrender before and surrender after introducing the sense of dreamless sleep.
Mm-hmm.
There's a sense of like more being having been cleared out, and it feels more, yeah, like more empty.
Yeah. And so this becomes a better reference for surrender because prior to this, the references you've been using have still had subtle qualities of imposition or observation still kind of muddling it. It still was surrender compared to what you were used to, but we're getting closer and closer and closer to some kind of purity until you don't even have to reference equality anymore. And now you know the taste of being empty, and you just let yourself empty out without referring to the quality of sleep. Because the only value of the quality is how it allows things to shift and clear up by themselves. But if you have a taste for the clearing out by itself, then it's as simple as starting to notice it again. Because it's always happening, even if we don't perceive it as such, even if we're imposing solidity. And so before we would use sensation as an intermediary to approximate that, we would notice something tangible, allow our attention to melt, soften, and soak into it gradually. As it does so, the pressure decreases, and you allow it to get subtler and subtler and subtler. Now we're just starting with a subtler quality instead of a grosser one. Instead of referring to sensation first and allowing that to melt and give way to something pure, we're starting with something even emptier, subtler than sensation. And that can really streamline the process if you can understand and see how simple it is. shit. Now, the way things appear initially when you orient your perception or consciousness towards the spectrum of unfolding is going to be flavored by the amount of habitual stress that you happen to be carrying that day, the state of your mind, the state of your body on a particularly given day. There's nothing that can prevent you from accessing it. But sometimes you will seem so dense and so caught up that you will seem to initiate, but actively still be trying without noticing. And you'll feel like there aren't really as many results or effects as you're used to, or it's not releasing as deeply. That's something you surrender to. Because the key isn't that everything has to be smooth. The key is to get on the spectrum of smoothening by itself. Everything is smoothening by itself. Regardless if you start off more caught up than usual, it's still valuable. It's still going to be effective because it's not the results per se. It's cultivating a deeper and deeper clarity of the process. And so even those times where we start off denser are equally, if not more, valuable than the times in which it feels much easier. I say this because if you can allow yourself to slip into this, no questions afterwards, no how do I manage, how do I tweak it, whatever it is, you just keep letting it unwind. If you can allow yourself to experience this during the things that seem to precede or the start of or during an episode, then it kind of takes the guesswork of how or what, because there's no how or what. If you access a holistic state of open-ended surrender that's deepening by itself, it's going to relax things very deeply. Because the episodes are based on a doing, an active compulsive doing that your body gets triggered into, if you have a lot of surrender going on as that is happening, it starts to counterbalance the process of the episode building up. And you'll more lean into just letting go as those things arise or before them. And so it's a very skillful way of starting to work with that, because it also gives you insight that even if the episode doesn't stop, even if it doesn't end, actually you were fine through and through. Because at the very least, you will not have resistance. And you'll stop experiencing the episode as something bad or inconvenient or uncomfortable. It'll more clearly just be, it is what it is, which will allow you to surrender more deeply as time goes on. And this is my hypothesis. I'm pretty certain about it based on my experience, but my hypothesis is that once you get to that stage where having or not having an episode is not a problem, whatever it is, and you're able to cultivate qualities of surrender regardless of what's going on, it's gonna start penetrating the stuff that really makes that stuff more prominent. And so, yeah, in the process of surrendering towards dreamless sleep, well, in dreamless sleep, you arbor no intentions, no agendas, no desire for things to be one way or another. You have no concept of it. And so, as a result, you have to surrender your agendas and concepts around the episode as well as you're engaging it. Previously, you would engage some quality of opening and surrender while still subtly holding on to things regarding agenda and intentions. And while things were pulling you in this more open-ended direction, something else was still holding on. When you set the bar higher for what it means to just be and be surrendered, you may be able to experience more and more of those concepts that used to remain, those holdings that used to remain, and find a deeper quality of progress than before. Comments or questions on that?
So if I holdings or resistances, like currently I have some hold patterns of hold.
Nah, stop. Does that question make sense? Whatever the fuck it is you're about to ask, does it make sense?
Doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Well, it was more like querying if there was anything to be done or not, or anything.
Yeah, does that make sense to ask that? Like where did you like nod off? Did you fall asleep for what I just said? Like I said it pretty comprehensively. It's like, my guy, we're talking about surrender and you're asking like, oh, so is there something I'm supposed to do for surrender? I'm like, bro. Like, your mind is trying to come up with these special cases and there are no special cases. It is what it is. There's no variation depending on the context. It's literally just what you did, just what you oriented towards. It's just that, except it just gets clearer and clearer and clearer. So good habit to form as well is whenever you notice certain kinds of questions arising, not even certain kinds of questions, just questions in general, notice the felt quality. Notice how it's surrendering itself. Allow it to be folded in to the spectrum of surrendering. Often you'll find that they fade, and if they're still important or relevant, they'll remain and be asked. But for the most part, most of the questions that come up answer themselves when you surrender, and it becomes clearer and clearer. Actually, I'm sorry, what do I need to know? I'm surrendering right now. There's nothing I have to hold on to. Why am I looking for answers? It's like questions themselves stop making sense in this arena. Because questions are about what's happening here. The spectrum of surrendering can start here, can start here, but the spectrum that it takes you on, it's going to go upwards beyond anything that you're used to dealing with. Given that all your questions are going to be based on things that you think you know and managing and not managing and all this dualistic stuff, it's irrelevant to the spectrum of allowing yourself to just unwind. Ultimately, all I'm trying to say is surrender everything. Or notice how everything is surrendering itself. As often as you feel you need to remember, as often as you can, in tandem with the seated practice that you're still doing. That'll give you more insight into doing, non-doing, meaning that you don't experience like you're doing anything in particular, but everything that needs or wants to be done just happens organically. But just to begin with, enjoy the release of the surrender. Enjoy the peace and the restfulness that it brings to your nervous system. It promotes lessened reactivity, greater and greater, deeper, more robust, stable, less triggerable, less reactive equanimity. And that quality, at least in and of itself, will allow you to not only practice the more formed things more easily, but understand more clearly the nature of how you still inadvertently resist and cause excess dissatisfaction where there otherwise is none. Does that clarify whatever it is you're about to ask?
Yeah.
Cool. Let's see. Yeah, curious thing is, after a certain point, the quality of dreamless sleep starts to become conscious even while you're not asleep. And that is a really decent way of describing a certain perceptual shift that's equivalent to a certain stage of awakening, one of the earlier ones. The dreamless sleep is the most rested. It's like absolute zero relative to our day-to-day experience. Most people usually can't surrender further than that. It turns out there's more, but at least in terms of like getting past like human identification and getting like some really deep and excellent progress made towards setting the right conditions towards a fuller awakening, orienting towards that dreamless sleep quality is extremely valuable in that sense. But yeah, it's just simple. It's just simple. And the key is it's not a doing, it's a reorienting. You recall, reference, or notice that quality. And do you allow yourself to drift, be pulled in, soak into, surrender to that flow, and notice how everything's taking care of itself. You don't even have to let it. You just have to notice that it's taking care of itself. And you let it deepen on its own. There's nothing else, nothing to understand, nothing to do. And so the last pointer or suggestion I'll give you is this. Initially, when we did this stuff throughout all these years, you'd get a sense of fluidity, a sense of like almost like a liquid-like flow of consciousness. When you start off softer, as you surrender more deeply, the density of the flow decreases and still it starts to feel like water evaporating, not flowing, but evaporating. Eventually, it just starts to feel like air flowing. Eventually, it's just the purity of space flowing into itself. And when space is let go, it's just the purity of awareness just being. And so the attitude or understanding that, in a way, things are pouring into themselves. Water into water, air into air, space into space, awareness into awareness, happening by itself. It's just the flow of experience. That's just the kind of stuff that you'll notice. It's going to be this progression towards less and less seemingly formed. You can let yourself go purely into that. I mean, actually, yeah, honestly, you can, since that'll take the mind-body split. Even though initially the body doesn't come along as much for the ride, it'll come along more fully once the split dissolves and it'll take care of itself. So I guess you can surrender to that purely. If you notice the quality of surrendering happening in the body as well, it happens sooner and you get a more robust, deeper, tangible kind of like relief in the body. Whichever way you begin, it ends up in the same. But yeah. The key isn't here that we're trying to understand something or find out something or claim or develop insight. It's just to get used to allowing and allowing and allowing and allowing. Or noticing how we don't have to allow because it's already allowing itself. It's already surrendering by itself. Within this, all of the insights that we would usually try to talk about or achieve will arise and clarify themselves. Because insight is really the process of understanding like what these knots and pressures had been, how they arose, how they're maintained, how they fall away, and how to allow yourself to be in such a way in which they don't arise anymore. Practicing deepening and deepening surrender sets up the perfect conditions for your intelligence to automatically notice that. You don't have to seek for it. It'll just happen on its own. Any other comments or questions on anything we've covered today?
Hmm. So I can just notice surrender happening by itself anywhere in the body.
I don't know. Can you try it? Like sometimes you just ask me questions that you can check for yourself. It doesn't take a lot of time or effort to just check. Oh, if I notice surrender in the body, how it's happening by itself, is it? Oh, wow, how simple. Because this is really leveraging the fact that what you look for, you shall find. You condition the appearance of things based on how you look. Previously, we were looking for resistance. We were looking for contraction. We were looking for things tangible to manipulate experience in certain ways. Now, we're not really looking for anything. We're not looking for something tangible. We're noticing for the release of the tangible happening on its own. Since we're looking for it, we will find it. So, yeah, it's as simple as noticing the quality of surrender already arising in any context, anywhere, in any way. You can associate it purely as just noticing surrender itself without anything in particular, or notice surrender in the context of the body to start off, if you want something that leans more into the somatic or sensation. The key is, once the process starts, the continuum is the same. It's going to be this emptying itself out. It's going to be the pressure releasing. It's going to be the resistances and tensions that come up. They can still come up, just more clearly being recognized and noticing that, oh, they're on their way to dissolving. There's nothing I need to do. How's that sit with you?
Okay, that's good.
All right. Anything else?
Um, I only asked because noticing the holdings of the body, I was like, maybe I can just notice that surrender is happening there, and that's it. And that's like, that releases the thing.
Well, the point isn't to loosen it, though. That's not the point. The point is that everything loosens itself as you surrender. And so if you're in the process of surrendering and you're not really focused on anything in the body, but it happens to arise in your mind, oh, there seems to be holding somewhere. The key isn't to shift your attitude of the flow and try to find surrender elsewhere. You're not hopping around from thing to thing, surrender here, surrender here. You start, and that's the continuity. Everything else that arises during that, including the observations and interpretations of tensions and pressures, you let that go into the surrendering itself. Because honestly, as soon as you notice that there is tension in the body, you don't even have to look for surrender there. You're going to start noticing it. Because that is what you're automatically doing as you're allowing yourself to deepen into the quality. So this really invalidates the need for like any kinds of questions, queries, considerations, because no matter what it is, it's the same. And you piece of shit, stop trying to use this to make yourself feel better. God damn it. I'm giving you something pure and you're like, yo, can I like use it as a magic wand that I can just illuminate this part of my body and like surrender, bam, it'll heal me. Um Theoretically, yeah. But if you do it with that intention, with that agenda, unless you let the surrender become more dominant, more important, and take care of itself, you're still going to be holding on, and your surrender won't be as deep. So, really, you're surrendering yourself. You're surrendering your perceptions, your conceptions, and that includes your desires, your judgments, what you think should or shouldn't be happening, or should be more ideal or not. Because the only reason you seek to treat certain things in your experience is because you reject them. But if you've already surrendered, you don't have the capacity to reject. And since you can't reject, you can't resist, and it'll resolve by itself. So you're just making it a bit trickier for yourself because, like I said, this is introducing you to a way of being that your baseline surrender, your baseline processing is going to be ridiculously awesome. If you use this in particular ways too early on, the risk is that you'll sabotage your progress towards this deeper, pure way of being for the sake of having like rather mediocre benefits. Because, you know, between you and me, if it were the choice of like, I have to wait like a couple of years for my tensions and my traumas and episodes to like dissolve, but I'm going to experience a natural okayness and freedom already. Or I can dissolve some of my tensions and traumas and issues now, but I'm not going to awaken and experience like my own intrinsic freedom until 2 years down the line. I choose to keep my bullshit and just go for the freedom. Because the freedom gives you more power and your ability to catch up and process further, it's going to expand. So it's also in a way being strategic if you want to keep it ego based or like, things that you get out of this. There are many ways to skin a cat. If you do this in the way that I'm attempting to suggest to you, you will access the supreme way in which cats just skin themselves. You know what I mean? But yeah, if you can be responsible and not fool yourself, then yeah, you can use it as a healing and relaxation approach. Yeah, just ensure the quality, the purity of the trajectory. That regardless of whatever you seem to have held on to while you're beginning, even if it's a desire to feel better, let it all be given up to surrender. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Anything else?
No.
Cool. All right. Today was a quick